In the heart of Elmswood, a village nestled between rolling green hills and a gentle, burbling stream, lived a watchmaker named Tobias Ticktock. His hands, though old and wrinkled, were steady and full of a quiet magic. They knew the language of gears and springs, of pendulums that swung with the rhythm of time itself. But Tobias's heart was lonely. The ticking of his many clocks was the only company he kept in his small, cozy shop, a place that smelled of cedar wood and polishing oil. He longed for a child to share his days with, to read stories to by the fire, and to show the wonders of the stars on a clear night. So he decided to build one. He did not use ordinary parts. No, for this creation, Tobias gathered the finest materials. The cogs were spun from moonlight, the gears were carved from ancient resilient oak, and her frame was forged from polished silver that shone like a tear of joy. He worked for a year and a day, his every touch filled with hope and a father's love. He gave her eyes of sparkling sapphire and hair made from spun gold. He painted her cheeks with the blush of a dawn rose. At the very center of her chest, behind a small ornate door, he placed a heart. This heart was a masterpiece of tiny, whirring mechanisms, and at its core, a single glowing ember of pure magic he had found by the Whispering Falls. When she was complete, Tobias wound a small brass key, the heart key, and placed it into the lock on her back. With a soft click and a gentle whir, the Clockwork girl opened her sapphire eyes and looked at him. "Papa?" she whispered, her voice like the chime of a tiny bell. Tobias's heart, which had been so quiet for so long, felt as if it might burst with happiness. He named her Liora, which meant my light. And she was. Liora was full of wonder and laughter. She learned to dance to the music of the grandfather clocks and helped her father polish the delicate watch faces until they gleamed. She was not just a collection of parts. She was love, given form. The village of Elmswood came to adore the Clockwork girl. At first they were cautious, marveling at her perfect mechanical movements. But her kindness soon won them over. She would help Mrs. Gable bake bread, her precise movements perfect for kneading dough. She would tell stories to the children in the square, her memory flawless, her voice captivating. Liora was a miracle, a testament to her father's gentle spirit. She was a daughter, a friend, a beacon of joy in the quiet village. Her ticking heart was a steady, comforting rhythm that echoed the peaceful life they all shared. A life filled with simple pleasures and deep, abiding affection under the watchful eyes of the old watchmaker. This peace, however, was as fragile as a watch glass. One day, a shadow fell over Elmswood. It came in the form of King Grimbolt, the ruler of the distant Iron Castle. His heart was as cold and hard as the stone of his fortress, and he coveted all things rare and beautiful. He did not love them, he merely wanted to possess them. His soldiers, clad in black iron armor that clanked with every step, marched into the village square. They were followed by the king himself, a tall, gaunt man with a crown of jagged iron and eyes that held no warmth. He had heard whispers of the magical Clockwork girl, and he had come to claim her for his collection. King Grimbolt saw Liora playing with the village children, her laughter echoing like music. His greedy eyes narrowed. "This marvel of engineering," he declared, his voice a low growl that sent a shiver through the crowd. "She is too precious for a simple village. She belongs to me, in my castle, where she will be displayed among my other treasures." The villagers gasped, and Tobias rushed forward, placing a protective arm around his daughter. "She is not a treasure, your majesty," Tobias pleaded, his voice trembling but firm. "She is my daughter. She is a person, with a heart that feels and a spirit that loves. She belongs here, with her family." The king only laughed, a harsh, grating sound like metal scraping on stone. "A heart? It is but a clever machine, old man. A beautiful, intricate machine that I will have." He then delivered his cruel ultimatum. "Give her to me willingly, and your village will be spared. Refuse, and my soldiers will take her by force, and I will burn your homes to the ground as punishment for your defiance." Fear, cold and sharp, pierced the heart of Elmswood. The villagers looked at their homes, at their families, and then at the innocent Clockwork girl who had brought them so much joy. The king's threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, a promise of ruin. That night, a profound sadness settled over the watchmaker's shop. The clocks seemed to tick more slowly, their chimes sounding like sobs. Liora sat beside her father, holding his wrinkled hand. She could feel the tremors of his fear and sorrow. She looked around the room, at the familiar faces of the clocks that had been her friends, at the workbench where she had been brought to life with such love. The king saw her as an object, a thing to be owned. But she knew better. She was Liora. And she understood that love sometimes meant making the hardest choices, not for oneself, but for everyone else. The king's greed was a storm, and she had to be the one to sail into it. Before the first light of dawn painted the sky, while the entire village of Elmswood was lost in a troubled sleep, Liora made her decision. She could not let her home be destroyed. She could not let the people she loved suffer because of her. With a quiet grace, she stood up from her small bed. She looked at her father, sleeping fitfully in his chair, his face etched with worry even in his dreams. A single, silent tear, made of the purest oil, traced a path down her rosy cheek. She knew she had to leave. It was the only way to protect them, to give them a chance. Her journey would be her own, a path she had to walk alone to face the darkness that threatened her world. She penned a short note on a piece of parchment, her script as perfect and elegant as an engraving. "Dearest Papa," it read, "do not worry. I go to face the king to protect our home. My love for you is stronger than any iron or stone. I will be brave." She left the note on his workbench next to the small brass key that wound her clockwork heart. Then she slipped out of the shop and into the pre-dawn chill. She carried nothing with her but the clothes on her back and the ticking magical heart in her chest. As a parting gift, she took one small creation of her father's, a tiny clockwork fox named Flicker, whose tail twitched and whose ruby eyes glowed faintly in the gloom. Her destination was the Forest of Whispers, a place children were told stories about to keep them from wandering too far. It was said the trees themselves spoke, that shadows played tricks on the eyes, and that strange, magical creatures lived deep within its tangled depths. It was a place of legend and fear, a formidable barrier between Elmswood and the Iron Castle that loomed on the horizon like a jagged black tooth. Liora, however, did not hesitate. Fear was a gear that could jam the works, and she knew she had to keep moving forward. With Flicker perched silently on her shoulder, she stepped off the familiar path and under the canopy of the ancient whispering trees. As she entered the forest, a hush fell. The air grew cooler, and the light of the rising sun struggled to pierce the thick leaves above. The trees did indeed seem to whisper, their leaves rustling with sounds that were almost words, almost warnings. Liora walked with a steady, determined pace, her small feet barely making a sound on the mossy ground. The clockwork fox on her shoulder, Flicker, would occasionally twitch his ears, his ruby eyes scanning the deep shadows around them. Liora was not just a girl running away. She was a protector on a mission, her mechanical heart beating a steady rhythm of courage against the encroaching silence of the unknown. The Forest of Whispers was not as menacing as the stories claimed, but it was alive with a strange and ancient magic. Liora soon discovered that the whispers were not threats, but guidance for those who listened with an open heart. Her first encounter was with a colony of glow moss, which clung to the sides of ancient stones. As she passed, the moss brightened, illuminating a hidden path. Following the gentle light, she came upon an old, gnarled oak tree with a face carved into its bark. The face belonged to Silva, the wise old spirit of the forest. The tree's woody lips moved, and its voice was like the creaking of ancient branches. "A clockwork child with a living heart's courage," Silva rumbled. "The Iron King's greed casts a long shadow, but even the deepest darkness can be pierced by a single point of light." Silva saw the purity of Liora's quest, her selfless desire to protect her home. As a gift, the ancient tree spirit offered her a cloak woven from fallen leaves and moonlight. "This will shield you from watchful eyes," Silva explained. "Wear it, and you will move as unseen as the wind." Liora gratefully accepted the cloak, its fabric soft and cool to the touch. And when she put it on, she seemed to blend perfectly into the dappled light of the forest floor. Continuing her journey, with Flicker occasionally pointing the way with a flick of his mechanical tail, Liora came to a crystal-clear stream that chuckled and sang as it flowed over smooth pebbles. Sitting by the bank was a sprite named Glimmer, who was weaving a net from dewdrops and spider silk. Glimmer was sad because a riddle from the grumpy river Kelpie blocked her way. The riddle was, "I have cities, but no houses. I have mountains, but no trees. I have water, but no fish. What am I?" Liora, with her precise and logical mind, thought for a moment. "A map," she answered confidently. The Kelpie, impressed, let Glimmer pass, and, as a reward, the grateful sprite gave Liora a small, smooth stone. "This is a stone of true seeing," Glimmer chirped, her voice like tiny bells. "Hold it to your eye, and it will show you the truth of things, stripping away all illusions and deceit." Liora thanked the sprite and pocketed the precious gift. She had entered the forest with only her courage and a small clockwork companion. Now she had a cloak of invisibility and a stone that could reveal the truth. The forest was not a place of fear, but a place of allies, a magical realm that rewarded bravery and kindness. Each gift was a step closer to the Iron Castle and a testament to the strength she was discovering within herself. After what felt like days of walking through the enchanted woods, Liora finally emerged from the tree line. Before her stood the Iron Castle, a grim and imposing fortress of black stone, devoid of any warmth or life. There were no flags, no flowers, only sharp angles and cold, unblinking windows. Using her cloak of leaves and moonlight, Liora moved past the iron-clad guards, as silent and unseen as a wisp of fog. The Stone of True Seeing allowed her to spot hidden traps and secret passages, guiding her through the castle's cold, labyrinthine corridors until she reached the throne room. There, surrounded by his lifeless treasures, sat King Grimbolt. The king was staring at a glass case, his reflection a pale, unhappy ghost on the surface. He did not notice her until she stood directly before the throne and let her cloak slip from her shoulders. "King Grimbolt," she said, her voice clear and steady, echoing in the vast, silent hall. He jumped, startled, his hand flying to the hilt of his sword. "You! How did you get in here?" he snarled, his eyes wide with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "I walked," Liora replied simply. "I came to ask you to leave my village in peace. They have done you no harm. To take me is to take the heart from my father and the joy from my home." The king sneered, his face twisting into a mask of contempt. "Joy? Love? These are foolish peasant emotions. I collect things of value, things that are rare and perfect. You are a machine, the most perfect machine ever made. You will be the crown jewel of my collection." He stepped closer, his greedy eyes scanning every gear and polished plate of her construction. Liora held up the Stone of True Seeing. "Look through this, Your Majesty," she offered kindly, "and see the truth of what you collect." Reluctantly, the king took the stone and held it to his eye. He saw his treasures not as beautiful objects but as empty, sad things, stolen from people who had once loved them. He saw himself as a lonely man, surrounded by hollowness. He dropped the stone, and it shattered on the floor. The truth was too painful for him to bear. "Illusions!" he roared, his face turning red with rage. "Tricks! You will not fool me!" He lunged for her, his hands outstretched like claws. But Liora did not run. She stood her ground and spoke with a wisdom far beyond her years. "You are not evil, Your Majesty. You are just empty. You think having more things will fill you up, but it only makes the emptiness bigger." She then reached behind her back for the small brass key that wound her heart. It was the key to her life, the source of her every tick and whir. It was her most precious possession. With a steady hand, Liora turned the heart key, and the gentle ticking in her chest slowed, then stopped. She held the key out to the stunned king. "Here," she whispered, her voice growing faint. "You want a treasure. This is the heart of my father's magic and love. Perhaps it can help restart yours." She placed the key in his hand. As his cold fingers closed around the warm brass, a wave of golden light erupted from it. The light pulsed through the king, breaking the spell of greed that had encased his heart for so long. Color returned to his face, and for the first time in years, a genuine tear traced a path down his cheek. As the light faded, Liora, her inner mechanism silent, collapsed onto the cold stone floor. King Grimbolt looked down at the still clockwork girl, and then at the key in his hand, which now pulsed with a soft, warm light. He felt a pang of remorse so deep it shook him to his core. He had destroyed the very thing he sought, a creature of true beauty and kindness. He knelt beside her, his cold, iron heart finally broken open. "What have I done?" he whispered. He gently took Liora in his arms and, followed by his now confused guards, carried her all the way back to Elmswood. He walked into the village not as a conqueror, but as a penitent man, seeking to undo a terrible wrong. He found Tobias in his shop, weeping over the note his daughter had left behind. "I have brought her back," the king said, his voice choked with emotion. She saved me. She gave me this." He held out the heart key. Tobias took it, his hands trembling, and looked at his silent, motionless daughter. He knew what he had to do. The ember of magic he had placed in her heart was a seed of life, waiting for a true act of selfless love to awaken it. Liora's sacrifice was that act. Tobias knelt and placed the key not in the lock on her back, but over her heart on her chest. The key dissolved into golden light and sank into her, and with a soft gasp, Liora's sapphire eyes fluttered open. She took a breath. A real breath. She was no longer Clockwork, she was a real girl. The joy that erupted in Elmswood was a sight to behold. Liora, with a real beating heart, hugged her father, tears of happiness streaming down her face. King Grimbolt, a changed man, vowed to rule with kindness and returned every treasure he had ever stolen. Liora's story became a legend, a reminder that true strength isn't found in iron or power, but in kindness and sacrifice. It taught everyone that love is the most powerful magic of all, strong enough to mend a broken king, bring a village together, and turn a clockwork girl with a ticking heart into a real, living miracle. And she, and her father, and the whole village of Elmswood lived happily, their days filled with light and laughter.